What are your thoughts around how we can reduce corruption in Sri Lanka, especially in the public sector?
Corruption has a detrimental impact on the nation's economy. It's a drain of valuable, scarce resources. And I believe that legal enactments have to be put in place to ensure that corruption is minimized, if not eliminated. In order to do so, we have to ensure the independence of institutions that are overseeing, monitoring, and bringing to book corrupt activities. And I believe it's extremely important that we focus on this issue with clarity, transparency, and openness. By and large, there seems to be a symbiotic relationship between the various donor individuals and institutions and the politicians. This is because the electoral system and the structure in itself encourages large-scale spending for political campaigns. Inevitably, since there is a necessity for large swaths of sums of funds, not in terms of rupees, in terms of dollars, there is an inbuilt system where corruption, malpractices, and malfeasance is given high priority in the agenda of most politicians. Take, for example, the immense amount of expenditures that have been expended in presidential elections. Where have those funds come from? Were previous governmental practices designed to ensure that such large swaths of funds were generated for potential future elections? The various mega projects that have resulted in Sri Lanka becoming highly indebted, and the citizens of this country are now having a per capita indebtedness reaching up to approximately 600,000 per person. I think the system in itself is corrupt. The structure in itself is corrupt. And I sincerely believe that there is an urgent necessity for far-reaching campaign finance reforms in this country in order to ensure that there is a level playing field when it comes to the conduct of elections. Now, having said that, I think it's vital that we ensure that we have consensus on the particular governmental structures or mechanisms that are put in place to eradicate corruption. I think there should be consensus across political parties and various political persuasions, and that consensus, that national agreement is important to ensure that there is peer pressure and that there is a societal compulsion on all politicians and all political parties to carry out their campaigns and their governmental policies and their system of governance in a very transparent manner, devoid and free of corruption.
Okay.
Now, if I may have a small chance to express my opinion on the present situation that we face, I'm extremely optimistic I think we have most of the basics in place. What is needed is innovative thinking, out-of-the-box policy decision-making in order to propel and fast-track the development effort of our country. In order to do so, I think we should persistently and continuously encourage free enterprise. Avoid unnecessary obstacles and hindrances for the wealth creating mechanism of a country. And I believe free enterprise and flourishing of businesses, both big and small and medium, would provide the most propitious environment for the country to attain economic growth. While achieving higher rates of economic growth is commendable and laudable, it's very important that the benefits and the fruits of growth are distributed in society in a just and fair manner. So what I would promote and encourage is inclusive growth. For decades we have seen a lot of exclusive growth, which has led to income and wealth disparities within Sri Lanka's society. So exclusive growth has to be negated and put aside, and inclusive growth has to be promoted and encouraged. In addition, when we talk of economic development, I fervently believe that knowledge-based development should be given a chance to flourish. In order to do so, I think we have to encourage the implementation of programs in the educational and tertiary educational arena that encourages the youth, especially in our society, to obtain the requisite skills and knowledge. For example, in terms of the digital technological revolution that is taking place in the emerging developing countries. Why we as a country have missed this opportunity? Primarily because policymakers and decision makers have not given adequate priority to encourage and promote and facilitate the digital revolution that is taking place throughout the international arena. And we have missed that opportunity. I would say, rather than using the word benefits, we are trying to empower the private sector with adequate fiscal support and adequate monetary support. As you know, in any economy, the fiscal and monetary policy balance is of the essence if one is to stabilize the economy and encourage the economy to grow. So as far as fiscal policy is concerned, the most important aspect is to provide the businesses, the private entrepreneurs, with a conducive environment through tax breaks, reducing the tax burden, and simplifying the tax structure. We all have accepted the famous dictum that higher taxes leads to retardation of entrepreneurship, which in turn leads to lesser economic growth. So I think it is vital and important to reduce the tax burden on the wealth generating businesses, both big, medium and small, and free them up to be innovative, to be smart.
So you're giving a commitment that will knock down the taxes, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
my manifesto says so.
Yeah.
And
I think we should put
for
our hands
those,
together for this.
for those who may respond with cynicism and sarcasm, I have to say my declaratory policies and action policies will be the same. There will be no discrepancies. What I say will be implemented on the ground, and you will be to see it yourself. In addition to that, the monetary policy has to be balanced, and there has to be proper management of the interest rates. We all know one who has adequate knowledge of basic economics, what we have studied in school and what we have seen in practice, the marginal efficiency of capital theory. As the interest rates go high, excuse me, as the interest rates go high, there is a disincentive to invest. There's a disincentive to be innovative and start up new businesses. So there has to be a concerted effort to give adequate interest rate relief so that access to capital, access to credit is a benefit that entrepreneurs, both traditional ones and the emerging ones, are given the opportunity of obtaining credit so that they become active participants and stakeholders in the wealth creating mechanism. So I think as far as fiscal and monetary policy is concerned, I'm very mindful of the beliefs and thinking in the business community, and I for one will always promote favorable tax policies and interest rate policies in order to encourage thrift, in order to encourage entrepreneurship, in order to encourage that we have the business sector very much motivated, very much ready to propel the economic growth of our country.
If you get elected as president, what will Sri Lanka look like in 2025?
Peaceful, stable, shared prosperity, inclusive growth, exports-based economic growth. We would have reached the highest echelons in the digital revolution. We will have a strong and vibrant, youthful group of policy administrators who will be guiding the country, and people will be there with a smile.
What about the international relations between managing China and India?
I think when we look at international foreign relations and international economic and trade relations, first and foremost, the policy decision makers and the country as a whole, we all should have a clear-cut definition of what is our national interest. If the policymakers and the country as a whole are very clear-cut about what our national interests are, I think most of these disputes and arguments that are raised primarily for political reasons by various sectors who do not have their economic fundamentals and development fundamentals in place, it is very important that we have a national consensus. By and large, we may not be able to have total agreement, but by and large the country should have a set of national interests and national objectives which the country agrees upon. And we have to ensure that in any relationship, both political and trade, that as a country we achieve a comparative advantage in our relationships. It should be a comparative political advantage, and it should be a comparative trade advantage. If we follow that particular principle and dictum, we call it in Sinhala Sapeksha Vasiya. Sapeksha Vasiya මත පදනම් වුණු ඕනම දේශපාලන සම්බන්ධතාවයක් හෝ විදේශීය සම්බන්ධතාවයක් තුළ අපේ රටට බොහොම ප්‍රගතිශීලී ගමනක් යන්නට පුළුවන්. So we have to ensure that international trade and political relationships are not formulated according to the whims and fancies of a few. You cannot have a small cabal of personnel deciding on the national interest. We have to have a national discussion and a national debate, and we have to continue to relate to the people. We need to get proper advice from specialists and from professionals in terms of these particular arenas, because as far as governance is concerned, throughout the decades, policy decision making has been by and large ad hoc, very much resorting to knee-jerk reactions. If you have your favorites coming and whispering in your ear, my dear king, this is good for the country, the day after it becomes a governmental policy. That is not the way to go. I think when governing a country, we have to have a rational process whereby the national interest governs all policy making. And I sincerely believe that in terms of international political relations, trade and economic relations, we have to ensure that we achieve the national interest and not the interest of outside actors, be it governmental, be it institutional, be it any other organization, governmental or otherwise. We have to ensure that we ourselves as a country is fully in control of the decision-making processes, and we should never ever allow outside forces to dictate our national policy agenda.
National security. What is your strategy to bring back confidence to the public that the country will be safe?
I think when we address the issue of national security, we have to look at basically two aspects. We have to possess the requisite machinery and structures and mechanisms to ensure that national security interests are achieved. Most important is to depoliticize the security apparatus consisting of the three forces, police and the civil defense force. The depoliticization process should be accelerated. We have, to a certain extent, established independent commissions that have given the independence for the police especially to take decisions on behalf of the country, but I think you have to go a bit further and ensure that the systems in place are devoid of political interference. We have seen on several occasions where those who are in power have intervened with the security forces to achieve their personal agenda and their personal objectives. This should not be the case. We have to ensure that the security forces have total independence, free from political interference in their policy implementations and in discharging their duties. And we also have to ensure that the necessary structures are in place to face the modern day challenges to national security. The issue of national security, in my mind, has several aspects. Of course, there is a tendency to focus on military security, which is fair enough. I think it should be given the highest priority, no doubt. I think our armed forces have to be modernized, trained, and appropriately equipped to face the modern day challenges of terrorism. The terrorism that we faced for 3 decades was a particular type of terrorism, which I don't think is the one that we face right now. What we face right now is a type of terrorism which is led by lesser numbers, creating maximum collateral and physical damage, maiming people, and creating death and mayhem. And I think greater priority has to be given to the intelligence services and the intelligence channels, and those aspects have to be strengthened and depoliticized. We will have special procedures in place, special structures in place that would address the issue of national security in a very, very surgical manner. In addition to the military security aspect, there is the economic aspect. If you examine the export destinations of Sri Lanka's exports, the vast majority, it's confined to 2 or 3 countries or groupings of countries. Now, this creates a serious situation of economic vulnerability, where those particular countries can use that as a bargaining tool and as leverage to decide on Sri Lanka's domestic policy. So we have to ensure that we embark on a process of export diversification. And that has to be a concerted governmental program, which we will go ahead with. And we have to look at social security. We have to have a safety net for the less fortunate in society. If we go back in time to the civil strife that took place in 1971 and in the late 80s, it was primarily the conclusions of the Youth Commission were that the youth of the day thought that there was a purposeful effort by governmental structures to ensure that the haves in society further prosper, and there was no hope at all for the have-nots in society. So we have to ensure that, excuse me, we have to ensure that you have to focus on the social security aspect of national security, and ensure that that people feel that the system is just and fair, and that there's adequate and equitable redistribution of income and wealth among all sectors of Sri Lanka society. And then again, look at the issue of political security. We had the situation several years ago whereby the then administration encouraged extremism, encouraged religious extremism to the extent that places of worship were destroyed, and this created enmity and disharmony within the various ethnic religious groupings in our society. So it's all and fine to talk about unity, territorial integrity, sovereignty, political independence of our country in our constitution. But I sincerely believe that such sentiments, such positive sentiments have to be in the hearts and minds of all of our people, irrespective of caste, creed, ethnic or religious persuasion. That is very important.
Okay.
So national security as a subject per se has a variety of perspectives. I do agree that the military security aspect should be given priority, should be prioritized, but one must not ignore the economic, social, and political aspects of national security.
Starting from environmental management to efficient management of the public service, debt management, then the role of the private sector. What are your thoughts around those 3 or 4 areas? And maybe touch a little bit about education also, because we are just spending 2% of our GDP on education and also investing more in child care.
Primary aspects of what we intend on implementing as far as the economy is concerned. We will strive to provide maximum amount of incentives and encouragement to promote foreign direct investment. And we will also install a competitiveness commission, which will ensure transparency in terms of foreign investors who are keen on investing in our country. We will establish an efficient one-stop shop, which would facilitate the approval processes that are necessary for foreign investors to set up businesses and factories in our country. So we will certainly be a very proactive administration as far as foreign investment is concerned. And I personally have observed the manner in which my late father, in a very crucial time in our history, in challenging times, how he was able to attract foreign investors while there were 2 insurrections taking place in our country. And we had large pools of foreign resources coming in to invest in the 200 garment factory program. What was most crucial was the personal supervision and the championing of foreign investors coming into our country. Every week you had the executive president meeting with the necessary officials together with the foreign investors, and there were time-targeted implementation programs in order to achieve those targets. I think governance overall in our country has to be so. We have to have a time-targeted, efficient approach to achieve our national policy objectives. Having said that, as a keen wildlife enthusiast who has proper knowledge of the biodiversity, the fauna and flora in our country, I would totally support and champion the sustainable development efforts that I have proposed in my policy manifesto. In fact, for the very first time, we have signed up to an environmental charter, and we have signed up to a social contract in terms of achieving those sustainable environmental and developmental targets. And in terms of the women of our country and also the youth of our country, we have furthermore established several charters and social contracts which would enable the governors of the country post 16th, which I hopefully think it's myself. We would enact legislation in Parliament to ensure that the women's rights, the rights of youth, and the environmental agenda are given legal teeth through legislative enactments, and we will ensure that those laudable declarations, proclamations, and announcements are transformed and translated into practical action, because action is what we need. In terms of education, I think it's very important to ensure that we promote education which fits the international labor market, and which fits into the emerging economic and other trends. So I think it's quite laudable to allocate large percentages of GDP in terms of expenditure, but I think such expenditures has to be targeted and appropriate. We have a huge deficit in terms of English teachers, science and maths teachers, and we have to ensure that the teachers that we produce ensure that the education that the students receive are of international standard. And I think we have to focus more on teacher training, better recruitment methods, and we have to cater to the various deficiencies that exist in the periphery. Most who are here at the center do not see the drawbacks, the shortcomings and the deficiencies in the periphery, the peripheral Sri Lanka, which most have forgotten. Most would define them as the silent majority of the country. And I, for one, shall strive to be the voice of the voiceless and be the representative of the silent majority, and ensure that in all sectors, education, health, agriculture, irrigation, environment, and so on and so forth, that we ensure that sustainable developmental models are adopted and implemented in order to ensure that there is shared prosperity and inclusive growth as far as the people of our country are concerned.
I know you have to catch a helicopter. This one final question for the tourism sector. What do you plan to do? Are you planning to extend the moratorium, or?
We will have a very comprehensive approach. I don't think moratorium per se would be our approach to tourism. We will establish a presidential task force on tourism, and we will ensure that the tourism policy is implemented. As far as the setbacks that took place because of the internal security situation and the retardation of tourist arrivals, we shall continue to support the tourism sector in terms of the various moratoriums that have been given. And when I addressed the stakeholders in the tourism sector, we gave an open promise that the moratoriums will continue until all the stakeholders in the tourism sector are up on their feet, back to the pre-Easter attack levels. And we have taken a step forward in promising to name tourism as an export industry. Through that pronouncement, I believe tourism can be used as one of the areas in which the country can flourish with minimal domestic investment. And it can be driven by tourism, it can be driven by foreign support and foreign investment and foreign grants which are readily available through the various international monetary institutions, because irrespective of us being a middle-income country, there is a greater propensity among the international monetary institutions to provide financial support to promote and encourage tourism. So that is an area that we have clearly focused in our manifesto. If I may, with your permission, just touch on 2 or 3 other aspects. As far as the state sector is concerned, we have to have an efficient state sector, a state sector that is motivated, a state sector that is managing through a proper recognition of objectives rather than for the sake of being afloat. So I think in terms of SOEs, we shall strive to ensure that SOEs are provided with the necessary support, necessary capital, the necessary modern management techniques to ensure that they are profit-making rather than loss-making and being a burden on the government's and the country's scarce monetary resources. In addition to that, we as an administration, we firmly believe in a prosperous Sri Lanka where prosperity is shared by all. And we shall structure our government policy to ensure that there is no discrimination. We have seen in recent times in recent decades, where policies have been structured to support and favor certain business conglomerates that have been the political favorites of the different political leaders. I think that should not be the order of the day. That, I think, should be removed from our system of governance. I think we should ensure that there is a level playing field where political contacts, political favoritism, and money does not dictate the industrial and political agenda of the country. Rather, we, the country as a whole, should oppose bandism of all sorts, be it family, be it business or otherwise. We should ensure that we establish a meritocratic society where the best and the brightest and those who have achieved excellence are given a primary role in deciding the destiny of our country. So the destiny of our country should not be handled by a coterie of political favorites and business conglomerates, which they would have as their sole objective of expanding their business empire. I don't think they have the national interest at hand. So I fervently believe that through a meritocratic system where justice and fairness prevails and where there is open, transparent and sound policy decision making with the participation of experts and individuals, if I may go out of my way, without casting aspersions on my fellow candidates. I think the two candidates who are here and the gentleman who is representing Mahesh Senanayaka, I think three of them, I feel that they are very well equipped to become partners of Sri Lanka's progress. I think in their respective fields.
So are you saying that they will serve in your next government?
Sorry, can I just finish that sentence? Sure. With the eloquent presentations that they have made, they have shown their credibility in their particular fields. And in fact, Dr. Ajanta is someone whom I have known. She has been in government, acting as consultant in several ministries. And I know of her capabilities, and Dr. Pallewatta, who has achieved much, and I should congratulate him on his achievements, and he has brought us honor, and we are proud to have him as one of the candidates, and I think these two are very well equipped, and they have the intellectual capacity to become partners of Sri Lanka's progress. And Mahesh Senanayake, I mean, he has been a great general in the war effort, which was headed by Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca. At least now, after 10 years and a few months, it has been admitted that he's the person who pioneered and spearheaded the war effort. And Mahesh Senanayake was, if I remember correct, was in charge of planning and logistics, and he played a pivotal role in the war victory. And he himself is quite a capable person who should be in government in the area of expertise that he has specialized in. So I think, all in all, I'm very happy to have had the opportunity of participating. You have to excuse me because we allocated the times 9:30 to 11 for this particular fireside chat. Even though I was sitting next to fire, it's disappeared. I didn't feel any of the warmth that comes with fire, but certainly this occasion has encouraged and stimulated myself, and I have been very much enriched by the statements that were made by my colleagues, my fellow candidates, and I wish you all very well and all the very best. And I would like to thank the International Chamber of Commerce for having taken the trouble to invite all of the candidates. In fact, you all spoke to us some way back 3 weeks ago, and we allocated our times. And I must say, I for one, I will not shy away from any debate. I will not shy away from government. I will not shy away from challenges. I think the mark of leadership is to face up to questions, face up to debate, and face up to challenges. And I can assure you, every aspect of my manifesto is part of the 25 years of experience that I've had in working for the country. And I'm quite capable, without any assistance, to back up everything that is here. The nuances and the intricacies and the policy prescriptions I've put forward, I'm always willing to back it up. And after the 16th, I'll make sure that the proclamations and stipulations and declarations are implemented in our country. And you will see action taking place at breakneck speed. And we will achieve prosperity in a short space of time. And we will ensure such prosperity is of the highest standards, and that prosperity will be enjoyed by all. Thank you very much.